The most popular accounts on Instagram have zero content.
True.
They are teenager, usually girls, who eat bananas. I mean, zero content, and they have 16 million followers. So we see, I mean, that's absolute proof.
Yeah.
Here's the problem. Signaling invariably leads, in studies that we had, invariably leads to performance anxiety. In other words, signaling enhances anxiety. Invariably. There is no situation that signaling reduces anxiety or has no connection to anxiety.
Okay.
It always increases anxiety. It increases anxiety, of course, because you have to maintain not only prospective success, but retrospective success. Let me try to explain it in common terms. If your last post had 2,000 likes and your next post has 1,000 likes, you failed.
Yes.
So you are constantly competing against yourself, actually, not only against others and not only against the market, but against yourself. You have to exceed yourself all the time. This creates enormous performance anxiety. Actually, we discovered that 41% of freshmen who were on social media reported extreme anxiety, compared to 18% of freshmen in 1985.
Right.
So the number of freshmen who reported extreme anxiety tripled over this period of time, and all of them were on social media, and it was the only component that changed between the two dates. So social media did this. We can safely borrow techniques and methodologies from epidemiology and regard social media as an epidemic. As we study Ebola or similar things, we can study social media. If we do that, we discover some amazing new insights. And one of the most important new insights is what we call in epidemiology self-limitation. All viruses spread very fast and then stop. Why didn't the Black Death killed all the population of Europe? Why it stopped at half the population? Why didn't AIDS kill all of us? I mean, why epidemics stop? Because viruses stop.
Right.
And why do viruses stop? Because they want to propagate. They want to continue to survive. If there were a virus who would have killed all the population, the virus would have died as well.
Right.
So we call this self-limiting.
Okay.
If social media are like viruses, and if we can use technologies from, I mean, then it means that we are coming right now to a stage of self-limiting.
Okay.
It means that the growth coefficient, the growth of social media will now stop. And we will then, the world will then be divided to two groups. The group of people who do not use social media and the group of people who use social media. And they are not geographical groups and they are not socioeconomic groups. And so we can't say, for example, the rich world will use social media, but not India and China. We cannot say rich people will use social media, but not poor people. We cannot say highly educated people will use social media. We can't say this because the profile of social media users, about 2 billion by now, is totally universal. I mean, there's nothing distinguishing, no distinguishing facet. The only thing that will distinguish these two groups, absolutely the only thing, is not gender, not income, not education, nothing. Only, are you using social media or not? This is a revolutionary thought because social media has a massive effect on psychology. In other words, there will be one group of people, about 2 billion, with one type of human psychology, and another group of people of about 5 billion with a totally different type of human psychology.
Okay.
And this is the first time, I think, that there is such a massive re-engineering of human psychology in between groups which count in the billions. So this is another way of looking at it. I would like to also, I'm going to talk a lot, and you can edit me out, of course.
I wouldn't dare.
If I were you, I would edit it, I mean, the whole thing. Just say, bloody hell, I just lost 1,000 quid. So, one thing I would like to, I think one thing that's neglected when we consider social media is by whom social media was created. Consider, for example, the fashion industry. The fashion industry was created by homosexual men. Homosexual men who had a liking to boys.
Yeah.
They created an ideal female figure which was boy-like, and to this very day, this is the ideal female figure. Females, women all over the world make the mistake. It's utter mistake. We have numerous studies that show that it's a mistake. It's wrong. It's not true. Women think that men like thin, anorectic, slim women, because that's what the fashion magazines are telling them. But the fashion magazines are telling them that because most of the founders of the fashion houses and fashion magazines were homosexual men.
And they're only interested in how they make the clothes look. They want clothes horses, that's it.
They want, but the ideal female form is actually male. Young male, teenage male.
So they're like androgenized women.
Right. And women adopted this, and they believe this is what men want. But actually we have numerous studies that show that men prefer fuller women, curvaceous women, women with love handles and so on. And women refuse to accept these studies. They say it's not true. Men like, why am I telling you this? Because social media was created by a very well-defined profile. It was all social media were invented by men. There was not a single woman involved. All social media were invented by schizoids, recluses, hermits, people who were socially inapt. All social media were invented by nerds. Most of these men, later on, when we read biographies and so on, we realized that they were asexual or with very low sexual activity. So the profile of the men who invented social media, and we're talking about all these men, is very, very, very narrowly defined. They created social media in their own image, of course. Since they were asexual, asocial, schizoid, white men, they created a tool which was geared towards asexual, asocial, schizoid, white men. And then what happened to this tool, to their utter surprise, for example, you can read Zuckerberg's articles and so on, to their utter shock, it took off. And it started to cater to black men and black women and very sexual people and asexual people and social people. It started to cater to population groups which were totally out of sync with the nature and character of the technology.
Right.
And I think we are witnessing this conflict. The technology is designed for a highly specific psychological profile, and yet it is being used, abused, and misused by other psychological profiles, and this creates dissonance. The technology has inbuilt dissonance, and I think we are feeling this dissonance a lot. We know that exposure to social media, and more precisely exposure to screen time, but not all screen time, but exposure to screen time and social media, we know that it tends to encourage depression, anxiety, suicide, and so on. Some numbers. Anxiety among teens increased by 20% since 2007. 17% of all teens with anxiety are today with severe anxiety, life-threatening anxiety. 17% compared to 3% about 10 years ago. We know that screen time decreases happiness, decreases life satisfaction. Everything I'm mentioning has a study attached to it, or studies attached to it. So it decreases happiness, life satisfaction, and decreases self-esteem. We know that. We know that it enhances anxiety and depression. The Royal Society of Public Health published a study in June this year, June 2018, which found out that 63% of all Instagram users are unhappy. Now, we don't know whether unhappy people gravitate to Instagram or whether Instagram made them unhappy. But since we have similar statistics for other social media, it would stand to reason that it's the platform that made them unhappy, not the other way. We know that anxiety and depression among the young, between 15 and 24, increased by 70% over the last 30 years.
That's a huge...
It's double, simply double. And we know that since 2010, teen suicide climbed by 31%. So teen suicide is rampant. And today, it is the first time in human history that the leading cause of death among teens up to the age of 24 is suicide. Not any disease or not even accidents. It used to be accidents. Today it's suicide. That's a leading cause of death. And this is intimately connected to social media. So it raises the question, why is that? Well, I mentioned before that social media is a conditioning tool, not an addictive tool, but a conditioning tool, and that it uses a relative positioning. But what are the emotions that are attached to relative positioning? Well, the first one is envy, of course. So social media are constructed around envy, pathological envy. They are purveyors of pathological envy and amplifiers of pathological envy. And they quantify via various ranking algorithms, they quantify envy with likes, with retweets. So they quantify envy, and then they leverage envy to motivate you. In other words, they use envy to cause you to adopt some course of action. So they weaponize envy. But not only envy, but I think even more so aggression. Of course, pathological envy is a form of aggression. People confuse jealousy with envy. And here's the difference. Jealousy is when I look at you and I say, I want to be Richard Grannon. So I will study hard, I will buy the right glasses, and so on. I will develop muscles. So it will motivate me to positive action. Jealousy is constructive. It motivates me to act, but in a positive way, to emulate you.
Right.
Pathological envy means that I regard you as a source of frustration, that I can't be like you.
Yeah.
So I would seek to destroy you,
Yes.
or to make you me.
Okay.
For instance, by forcing you to wear white shirts, which you will never do. So pathological envy is a form of aggression.
Okay.
And when we look at social media, we see that all social media encourage aggression via their algorithms and via the way they foster interactions. So they encourage, for example, peer aggression. They encourage bullying, they encourage mobbing, gang stalking, they encourage black humor, they encourage brutal honesty, and so on and so forth. You could say, what do you mean encourage? It's an empty space. I mean, you can put, in this empty space, you can put brutal honesty, or you can put compassion. It's not like they are forcing you, it's your choice how to abuse this empty blank space. Well, of course it's not true.
Yeah.
It's not true because these platforms have been designed to condition, or as the founders and constructors of this platform now are attesting, they were conditioned to become addictive. But it's wrong, it's not addiction, never mind. We know what they're trying to say. These platforms encourage repeat use, repeat compulsive use. And now we know from psychology that only these kind of emotions, aggression, envy, hatred, only these kind of emotions encourage repeated use. And repeated. So there is no way that they have designed these platforms without being aware that they must leverage these emotions to create addiction.
You're saying that in order to guarantee that there would be eyeballs on the screen for longer and more eyeballs on the screen, they've deliberately fostered negative emotions in that space.
Yes.
Anger.
There was no other way.
Envy.
Yes.
Resentment.
Yes. And they cannot come out and say you're wrong. We similarly encourage love, because all psychological studies show that love does not motivate, it does not create or motivate repeat usage, repeat action, does not foster addiction.
No.
We have forms of love which are addictive, but then we're talking stalking, erotomaniac stalking, infatuation.
Yes.
These are pathological states. So, pathologies. These platforms were designed with pathology in mind. It's not what I am saying. Some of the founders of Facebook and the main engineer of Facebook in the first few years have now gone public and admitted that they have built addiction into the platform. And how do you do that? The only way to build addiction into the platform is to foster, engender, and enhance exactly these emotions.
Right.
There is no other way.
Yes.
You can't encourage voluntarism or love and expect repeat usage. Simply, there's no studies that support this.
Yes.
So it's no wonder that these platforms ended up being platforms for hate speech, for fake news, for bullying, cyberbullying, for no wonder at all. They were built for this.
Yes.
They were absolutely built for this. Consider, for example, Twitter. Twitter limited the number of characters until recently to 140, now they increased it to 160. But never mind, 140. What we know is that aggressive speech acts are much shorter. I'm serious completely. There are psychological studies from the 60s, 70s, Princeton studies, and so on, that have demonstrated that aggressive speech acts are much shorter than non-aggressive speech.
It makes sense. If I'm going to have road rage, I'm going to say "fuck you." I'm not going to say, "Listen, I'm very disappointed with the way that you drove." For
Exactly.
Characters.
Yes, I mean exactly.
Rage will come
and
out.
we tend to send love letters.
Yes.
I never heard, for example, of a road rage letter.
Yeah, I love you. Fuck off.
Yeah, and if you would say "I love you," the other party would be very disappointed or taken aback.
And it could be
That's all you have to say.
It could be passive aggressive if it was so short. So yes, this totally.
No, but even if you say "I love you" and you mean it,
Yeah.
the other party would usually say that's all he has to say. I mean,
Yeah.
what's wrong with this guy?
Right.
It's I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
Love is effusive. Compassion, empathy, they're effusive. In order to engulf, in order to accept, in order to make the glow, in order to create these positive emotions, you need to work hard.
Yes.
And you need to be very verbose.
Yes.
However, in order to injure you, or attack you, or frighten you, or terrorize you, or whatever, usually 2-3 words suffice. So we know from starting in the 60s and well into the 80s, which is the period that this was studied, we know that aggressive speech acts are much shorter than, so why 140, by the way? What was the technological need for 140? Why not 1,400? I mean, what was the problem? Server space? What exactly limited?
Well, I mean, if you're right, I think you are, the inference, it's horrendous. They're deliberately fostering aggression.
It's not what I'm saying. I encourage you actually in Plugged In to find the latest interview with the chief engineer of Facebook, former chief engineer.
Richard found it.
Former chief engineer.
It's really
and he says we built it for addiction and we built it with these features, with negative features. And he said, I regret it, I feel horrible, I regret what I've done. And now PBS came up with 2 programs about Facebook, which actually claim that it's an extremely, extremely sinister platform. And it is extremely sinister platform. I'm saying that it's extremely sinister because of the way it's designed and the algorithms behind it. And I'm saying this from the point of view of psychology, clinical psychology. Not, of course you can make use of these platforms in numerous ways, but you're not encouraged to.
You're not rewarded for it.
You're not rewarded for it. I mean, I can give you a knife, and with a wink and an old nod, I can tell you, if you stab Richard, I'll give you £4,000. And you know, I'm good at my, I can do that. Or I can give you a knife and say, no, if you cut the bread for me, I'll be very grateful. I mean, depends how you're motivated. Many people would stab Richard. It's the instrument or the tool is only as good as what you are rewarded for.
Sure.
Rewards, incentive systems, and so on usually determine usage. I think if there was no fear of using knives on people, many more people would use knives on people. Because we have a negative incentive for using knives on people. We don't use them on people.
Sure.
This negative incentive is called prison. Simple.
If you took it away, then maybe people would
Take that away, and trust me, there will be an epidemic of people stabbing people. So incentives, both negative and positive, regulate behavior. And to a very large extent, by the way, regulate emotions, which it would explain why anxiety, depression, and so on and so forth. Because if you're exposed to utterly negative territory, where negative messaging is rewarded, where negativity rules, where negativity is retweeted and liked, etc., obviously it will poison you. It's a toxic environment. And you are poisoned, simply. As surely as with arsenic in your food. You're poisoned. And your mind begins to change. Neuroplasticity guarantees that. Your mind begins to change. First of all, you begin to defend against this toxicity. And one way to defend is to withdraw. So many people withdraw. I believe social media is the most asocial invention of ever, like ever. It encouraged more asocial behavior than anything, before or after, in my view. Social media created an unprecedented wave of withdrawal and atomization. That's a reaction to negativity and so on. And on the other hand, those who have aggressive tendencies and so on would find social media an ideal turf. So they gravitate towards social media and, of course, enhance the toxicity.
Yes.
It's a self-perpetuating feedback loop, a filter, a negative filter, which amplifies and attracts and connects like-minded, aggressive, dangerous, lethal, crazy people. This amplification is known as network effect. Of course, all these platforms, social media, were designed as networks. Now you can say, wait a minute, what this guy is saying? I mean, that's a very trite statement. Of course it's a network. Social media network. Why? We have numerous ways of organizing social interactions. Why did social media choose networks? Why didn't they choose hierarchy? Why didn't they choose curated conversations with editors, moderators? Before social media came online, we had other ways of interacting online in the cyber world, which had nothing to do with networks.
No, forums were huge, weren't they?
Forums, for example. I had a forum with 250,000 members.
Wow.
I had a forum for 10 years, 5 years. It had 250,000 members. And it had moderators. We had 30 or 40 moderators. So it was what we call curated conversation. Everyone could say anything. It was super active. Everyone was happy and satisfied. It spawned numerous other forums. It said, what was wrong with this model? In other words, our natural assumption or instinctive assumption, we were brainwashed. We were brainwashed by social media to believe that the only way to run social media is with a network model.
Right.
It's not true.
Yeah.
This model was selected on purpose because it's the only model that has what we call network effects. Now, network effects leads back to epidemiology. Network effects are an epidemic. Simply epidemic. Infection, intellectual and emotional and psychological infection of people by other people. Exactly as you would spread the Black Death or Ebola, you spread your social media.
Okay.
Social media could have selected, as I said, hierarchical model, curated model, and any of 20 or 30 existing models for online interaction, yet they chose none of them. They chose the only model, which is self-propagating, self-replicating, invades your DNA, your psychological DNA, alters your brain via neuroplasticity, conditions you, and later gets you addicted. The only model that does this is network, because of network effects. So this created shared psychosis, in many cases, mass hysteria in many cases, cults, including death cults, including teenage death cults, and it created new types of role models, such as school shooters. So network effects theoretically can be leveraged for good. Example would be Wikipedia. Can be leveraged. But even Wikipedia, for example, started as a network and gave up on the model. Right. Why did it give up on the model? Because it became a cesspool of aggression, misinformation, slander, libel. So at some point...
You were an editor for Wikipedia from the early days,
I was one of the 100 founders.
You were the founders of
We were
Wikipedia,
100 people who founded Wikipedia. It was called Nupedia at the time. Nupedia, and then Jimmy Wales threw away all of us and took over and made it Wikipedia. And Jimmy Wales Wikipedia, when it started, was Nupedia, and it was curated.
Right.
Each one of us had an editor. I wrote the entry for Nazism. I had an editor who was a professor of psychology, and so on. It was curated. We still created content, but Jimmy Wales came and said, no, I'm converting Wikipedia to a social network. And Wikipedia became Facebook. Anyone could edit, anyone could interact with anyone. I mean, there was no end. It was spreading, network effects, and so on. And within 10 years, it became an utter sewage, cesspool, attacks, nutcases, slander, libel, hatred, hate speech. I mean, horrible. I had a public altercation with Jimmy Wales on numerous magazines all over the world, Brazil, Russia, you name it. And finally, I don't know if it's owing to me, I suspect not only because of me, but I was the only one who sued him in court, by the way. So finally, Jimmy Wales retreated and changed Wikipedia back to Nupedia.
Okay.
And today Wikipedia is actually curated.
Okay.
It's not a network.
Right.
But look what happened. The minute it became curated, the number of active editors dropped from 3 million to 70,000. People are not interested. People want the aggression.
Yes, they want the chaos.
They want the chaos. They want to. So, realizing human nature, you are faced with two options. Either you surf the wave, you ride the wave, or you put up dams, and you try to act civil and try to channel this energy or whatever. Facebook, Twitter, all these networks are surfing the wave. They know it's a dangerous wave. They know people are drowning. They read all the statistics of increased suicide rate, depression, anxiety. They know absolutely everything. They have designed maliciously, malevolently, and possibly criminally, I don't know. They have designed their algorithms and their networks exactly to cater to human pathology in its most extreme forms. And they have sown the wind. I am not sure they will not reap the storm. I think it's coming.
So you said that it's a self-limiting virus. Do you think, like the documentary we're making with Plugged In, and we can see that other people feel the same way. Do you think this is all part of that, where people are saying, okay, enough is enough?
Yes.
And then you said that there will be two groups. One group will continue, the other group will no longer use social media. And then I think you said their psychologies will be molded differently.
Diverge.
So you think there will actually be the social media users if they keep going for another 10 or 15 years, they'll be more pathologized, or?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's the first time in human history, that's why I said it's a revolutionary statement. It's the first time in human history we have created a technology that succeeded to pathologize 2 billion people.
Right.
These 2 billion people, most of them, not all of them, it's too late to save them. They are conditioned and addicted. And maybe 1 billion of them, or 1.5 billion of them, 1.2 billion, I have no way to predict, but some portion of them will remain on social media forever. And their pathologies will increase, and they will become sicker, more anxious, more depressed, more suicidal, more in need of therapy, less functional, etc., more atomized, more schizoid, more everything. And this group of people will be like an island. They would live on social media. It's like these famous multiplayer games, They would live in social media. It become their world.
Yeah.
They will swap the delusional fantasy world of social media for reality, and they will lose the reality test, which is the definition of psychosis in psychology. But this will be one group, and the rest of humanity. There has never been a case in human history of a group that big going sick, mentally sick. Never been a case, maybe with the exception of Nazi Germany, maybe. But there's never been such a case. So we don't know, and I cannot predict what it would mean.
So to be clear, I think what I'm hearing you say is that people have quite literally been driven crazy, dangerously crazy, by the social media usage, and that it was designed to do that, to addict them to the social media.
It was designed to condition them, and to some extent addict. It's more conditioning, but designed to condition them. Once they got conditioned, they reacted like any conditioned or addict. They developed depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
However, when you develop depression and anxiety in reality, reality has the capacity to cure you, to heal, via what we call the reality test. Reality keeps sending you messages that intrude on your depression and anxiety. So, for example, a beautiful girl smiles at you. You are promoted at work. I mean, something happens. I mean, gradually, and this is how we overcome grief.
Yeah.
Grief, for example. Time heals everything. What do you do if you are firewalled from reality and you live in a toxic environment that gets increasingly more toxic, where you're exposed only to toxic messages and where you are engaged in a toxic activity of social ranking, which is made public in order to shame you and motivate you to further go into the toxicity? It's a self-perpetuating loop. You have no countervailing influences. And so it becomes what we would define as psychotic disorder. I mean, it's a psychotic world. It's a bubble. So it's the first time it's happening in human history. I have no way to predict what would such a billion people do. Sure. Because they're spread everywhere. And they are men and women. And they are of all age groups. And they are all socioeconomic strata. And all education levels. I mean, it's not, they're not limited. They are more or less like seeds. And in this sense, they're an epidemic. When there's AIDS, you have AIDS in San Francisco, you have AIDS in Paris, you have AIDS in Africa, you have AIDS in China. It's in this sense, I'm comparing it to a virus. It's a group of sick people who were exposed to a virus known as social media. And now they have sickness. Every virus is self-limiting. This documentary is a manifestation of self-limitation. But we have other phenomena which are even more impressive than this documentary. For example, the fact that about 20% of all social media users pull out of social media, disconnect, close their accounts or inactive accounts, and even get rid of their smartphones. That's more extreme, but there are people who are doing this. Get rid of smartphones. There is a new phenomena of retreats where you cannot go with your digital devices.
Oh, that's great.
There's a new phenomena of jammers, so that when you enter cinema or ballet or opera or whatever, your smartphone is disabled automatically.
That's great.
So there are many signs of revolt and rebellion against the status quo. And that's why I'm not saying that all 2 billion users of social media will be pathologized to the end. But 1 billion probably will.
Yeah.
That's a gigantic number. It's what we call in physics phase transition. It's such a big number that it must have a universal, all-pervasive, extensive effect on the totality of humanity. What this effect will be is anyone's guess.
Right.
So even the pathology is not well understood. We don't really understand what is the pathology. There's a new diagnosis in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, edition 5, 2013. There's a new diagnosis, internet addiction.
Okay.
It's new. But I don't think it captures nothing. It doesn't capture sociological aspects, cultural aspects, I mean, none of this. How, for example, will we, the healthy people, how are we going to accommodate these people? What I, as someone as a therapist, how would you, if someone comes and says, listen, I'm very depressed because I'm all the time on social media. What tools do I have to cope with that? What if a group of these people sue for disability benefits?
Maybe, yeah.
I can't disengage from social media. I'm on social media 10 hours a day. I try, I can't. I mean, it opens all kinds of very interesting questions, political, economic, legislative, therapeutic. I mean, this is a group of sick people. As we had to cope with the outcomes of AIDS and the outcomes of the influenza of 1918, I mean, as we have to cope with previous epidemics, we will have to cope with this. And the difference is that the social media epidemic is much more reminiscent of zombie movies than it is of anything else. Because if you have Black Death, you die. If you have influenza in 1918, you also die. If you have AIDS, until a certain point you died, and after that you lived. So these are situations we are familiar with. But social media addicts are much more like zombies. Their psychology is altered to the point that some of us would have difficulty relating to them, even via empathy.
Right.
We would have difficulty relating. It reminds me that there are groups of people who live inside multiplayer games.
Yes.
They absolutely live there.
Yes, yeah.
These games have money of their own. You can buy all kinds of merchandise and goods and so on and so forth. And so when you talk to these people, and I did, when you talk to these people, they try very much to pretend that they're in reality, but they're not. Absolutely not. They live much more there, inside the computer, than outside the computer. So how would we relate to these people? We don't even have the common background. You know.
Is that possibly a way of explaining the difficulty that people are having now relating to each other? Because they've lost the ability to relate outside of...
I think that, as I said before, I think that social media is the most asocial, or even antisocial, invention ever. It atomized, pulverized, rendered the social fabric completely. By now, completely, because it started with 6 million users, but now we're talking 2 billion. The effect is global and total. So by now, I think the effects of social media have been disastrous. For example, teens prefer to interact with other teens exclusively via social media. The number of face-to-face interactions among teens dropped by 70%, 70, not 7, 70, in the last 10 years. The amount of dating, teenagers, dropped by 63%. The amount of sexual encounters, blowjobs, you name it, dropped by 50%. In other words, teenagers have moved exclusively to social media. They no longer interact with each other, except via social media. There are numerous documented observations and cases of teenagers communicating via social media, sitting next to each other.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Sitting next to each other.
Yeah.
We have documented observations and studies of teenagers on, for example, trips, sitting next to each other but communicating via social media and not talking to each other.
It's like something from a sci-fi dystopian movie, isn't it? People just sit there twitching and flicking their thumbs to...
Yes, of course, this has effect on sex.
Yes.
And in due time, reproduction, family formation. Indeed, family formation dropped to an all-time low. Less than 1/3 of people under the age of 24 consider having a family. More than 1/3 of people under the age of 24 are homosexuals, and so on. Nothing against homosexuals, let it be utterly clear. It's a sexual preference that I respect, and I have no problem with whatsoever. I'm not homophobic in any way, shape, or form. But homosexuality reflects a basic disconnect, because we know that the historical figures for homosexuality, we know that they were within a certain range. And it is inconceivable that a sexual orientation or a sexual preference will triple within less than 6 years.
What do you think has caused that? And it's particularly amongst the young, isn't it? Where
Yes, under age 24.
And social media, you think, has caused?
Yes, I think one of the reasons is social media. It's much more comfortable to interact with your own gender if you are not face-to-face. Social media enhances like-minded, what we call bubbles, enhances like-minded people. So, for example, politics. Social media, you will gravitate in social media to people who think like you, agree with you. You will read only news stories that agree with you. You will never read anything that disagrees with you, challenges you.
It feeds you that. The social media feeds back that which it knows you're going to look at, right?
So this is called bubble. So there is also a gender bubble. It's much easier for you to interact with same gender. So same gender, same income, same education, same political views, same sports preferences. So if you're a fan of this club, you will gravitate towards, and so. So
people are literally fucking themselves.
So, yes, sir.
Or an archetype of
yes.
reflective archetype.
So as I said in previous interviews that we homosexuality is autoerotic.
Right.
Absolutely autoerotic. It's a form of masturbation in effect. So, of course, it has psychosexual dimensions, it has emotional dimensions, it's as rich and as profound as any relationship between two genders, two opposite genders. No one is taking this away. But there is something in homosexuality that does not exist in heterosexuality. It's the fact that you're making love to your own gender. In other words, a pronounced autoerotic element. And this is exactly what social media does. It closes you down, it fragmented society into identical groups. And I call this phenomena identicalness. We'll talk about it when we talk about malignant egalitarianism.
Sorry, yeah.
Identicalness is the tendency to propagate, to collaborate, and to interact only with people who are very, 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 very much like you. And of course, the epitome of this is the selfie.
Yeah.
Because in the selfie, what you're doing, you're interacting with the only person who is 100% like you. Selfies today constitute 60% of all activity on social network. We don't have statistics for the beginning, but I remember the beginning. And I remember when social network started, it was never about selfie. I mean, I don't remember selfies. No. Actually, the word selfie entered the Oxford English Dictionary only in 2015.
Oh, really?
10 years after social media became popular.
Yeah.
Because at the very beginning, there was no such thing as selfie. Selfie became very prominent in 2015, 14, and today it is 6 out of every 10 posts. In other words, 6 out of every 10 times we interact with ourselves.
Yes.
We watch ourselves, we shoot
And then we're inviting the world, in inverted commas, to look at us too. I'm looking at me, look at me too.
Look, I'm looking at me, you look at me, me. And so I would put it like this, as far as autoeroticism, not as far as depth of emotions, not as far as depth of interaction, but as far as the autoeroticism, there's heterosexuality, which is very different. It's not autoerotic, it's different. It's heteroerotic, having sex with the other. Then there is homosexuality, which is having sex with someone who is 50% like you. I mean, almost you. And then there is selfie, which is masturbating, having sex with yourself. Indeed, the main sexual activity between 15 and 45, 15 and 45 among men is masturbation.
Right.
It become the main sexual activity.
That's frightening.
51% of all internet users consume pornography on a daily basis, at least once a day. And this in order to masturbate. If you look at only the male side of internet users, it's 90%. Women do it much less. So we have a situation of making love to ourselves, literally, making love to ourselves psychologically, falling in love with ourselves. If you take photos of yourself all the time, you must be in love. Developing emotional investment in ourselves. This is known as catexis. Catexis is emotional investment. Object relation theory in psychology told us that we start by being emotionally invested in ourselves, and then we learn to externalize this investment and invest in others. And this is called object relations. We invest in objects. But social media reverses this process, creates regression. Indeed, social media encourages very, very primitive, infantile, baby-like defense mechanisms, such as splitting. You're either my friend or my enemy. You don't like me, you are my enemy. You like me, you're my friend. It's the like-dislike. It's very binary, binary state. You know, very, very primitive, baby-like. Today, Facebook added emojis and all kinds of possibilities. But have a look. Take 1,000 posts. No one uses them. No one uses them. Vast majority are still using like, dislike. Yeah. A few, tiny few are using wow or very few. Yeah. No one uses them. Yeah. So it's very binary. So it's splitting is an example. Like you're my enemy, you're my friend. Black and white thinking, catastrophizing. That's why we have conspiracy theories and so. Social media caters to the most primitive defense mechanisms, behaviors, traits. It is, in this sense, psychologically regressive. Right. And here's the problem. If they had good intentions, you could say, okay, they tried, they got it wrong. No. It's all by design. That's the shocking thing. There is no difference, therefore, between social media and tobacco. Right. Or drugs. In effect. I can see a world where social media will be banned. I will not be shocked at all.
Yeah.
Frankly, on psychological grounds alone, I would have banned it, of course. Anything that increases suicide by 31% should be banned.
And so I was going to suggest, within the paradigms of this documentary, that maybe we don't say to people, look, you don't have to stop, but maybe reduce it. But based on what you've said here, really the only responsible thing to do is to stop. If it's that toxic that it's actually designed to actively encourage aggression and envy in the way that you...
And regression.
And regression.
And as when you regress, you don't have control.
Yeah.
So lack of impulse control. These are all very, very serious and sick pathologies. But forget all this. There is a direct link established now beyond any doubt on 3 continents between this thing, anxiety, depression, and suicide. Simple. In the most vulnerable group, 15 to 24. If there were a drug, a legal drug, that would have created the same effects, it would be banned by now. Banned. If someone came up with a pill for, I don't know what, a muscle-enhancing pill, energy-giving pill, and teens would take it, and then suicide would shoot up 31%. The pill would be banned, don't you agree?
Absolutely.
That's what social media is doing.
So that I can't say to people, you can have a little bit of this highly toxic substance.
Of course you can.
Yeah.
And it's very telling that social media is not doing this. For example, why not limit the usage to 2 hours a day? Why not have a clock, an inbuilt clock, that I can use my Facebook only 2 hours. After 2 hours, Facebook will block me.
Well, Instagram just last week put a clock in, and I imagine Facebook will too, because they know that documentaries like this are being made and that the tide is turning.
If such clocks are introduced, it only enhances my proposition that it's an epidemic.
Yes.
But that's not the real question. The real question, why wasn't it done 10 years ago? Why wasn't it built that way? If the whole platform was built for addiction, as the chief engineer himself admits, if you knew that you were creating addiction, why didn't you limit the number of pills? Why didn't you limit the usage? Ab initio, from the very beginning. Why did you have to wait until, by a rough estimate, 20,000 teens died every year, every single year? Why did you have to wait for this to happen before you introduced a watch?
He was being pulled up in front of the Senate committee, and I think even in Britain they're trying to get him in front of some people here to question him as well.
Yes, because it's tobacco. It's exactly the same strategies of tobacco. Tobacco companies knew it's addictive. They introduced ingredients that made it addictive. Their advertising made it addictive. I mean, it was all about addiction. It's exactly the tobacco situation. And tobacco is addiction, not conditioning. Social media is conditioning. I can't emphasize how critical this distinction is. Addiction can be overcome. There are well-known techniques to counter addiction and reverse it, and so on and so forth. Conditioning is much more difficult. Much more difficult.
Conditioning, undoing conditioning, is more like the type of work that we do when we're dealing with trauma victims, isn't it?
Yes, trauma victims have some conditioned affect and behaviors. But no, we're talking much deeper conditioning. Conditioning, for example, to food or to pain aversion, and so on.
So primal conditioning.
It's primal condition, yes. The social media, because listen, we are social animals. The most terrifying thing for us is not to have food, not to be in pain. Pain doesn't frighten us. Food doesn't frighten us. The weather doesn't frighten us. The most frightening thing for any of us is to be ostracized, to be excommunicated, not to belong. It's absolutely by far the most frightening thing. We can look at history. People prefer to die, just not to leave the community. The biggest weapon of the Catholic Church for 400 years was not burning on the stake, auto da fe. It was excommunication. The worst heretics were left to live, but they were excommunicated. When Benedict Spinoza, attacked the Jewish perception of God, when he attacked the concept of God in Judaism, he was not killed, he was not stoned as the Talmud dictates. He was simply excommunicated, that's all. He was thrown out of the community. There is no bigger punishment. None. If I was threatened with lack of food, or No one will talk to me for 10 years. But I mean no one. Not even you. No one. I don't know what I would have chosen.
Yeah.
I think I would have chosen to go hungry.
Yeah.
It's nothing more frightening.
It's brutal. It's a brutal.
And this is what social media is threatening you with. If you don't behave in certain ways, if you are not negative, if you are not hate speecher, if you don't behave in certain ways, your likes will be nothing. Your likes will be minimal. You will not be retweeted. You will be ignored. You will be excommunicated. If you want to belong, this is what you have to do. Do it. Be aggressive. Be split. Dumb down. Don't be intellectual. Dumb down. Keep it simple, stupid. I mean, they don't tell, I mean, there's no manual how to be popular.
It's coercive.
Trial and error. Trial and error. And then you discover, if I am stupid, I have more likes. The stupider I am, the more likes I have. The more scarce or sparse the content, the more likes I have. If I put a banana peel, I will get more likes than if I put Aristotle's quote. If I don't use long words, I will be more popular. If I don't pretend that I know something, or if I don't tell people that I know something, I'll be. So you dumb down. One of the things it does is it forces you to hide your true identity. Social media forces you to become not you, to deny critical aspects of you. If you're intelligent, you have to deny that. If you're empathic, you have to deny that. If you're compassionate, you have to deny that. So it forces you to conform to some kind of ideal that is essentially aggressive, regressive, infantile, and in one word, narcissist.
Narcissistic psychopath. Yeah. I'm not proud, but I'll say it. I watched a YouTube video that was talking about promoting yourself on social media, and it advertised, it said there's a thing that you should do, and if you're traveling, you should take a selfie of yourself and show people that you're on a plane. And I was like, that is the dumbest, most narcissistic and pointless fucking thing I could do with a smartphone. I tried it the next day. The most likes I've ever had in a post. And then you saw me repeat that again and again and again. People loved it. I'm like, it's not a picture of anything. It's just my stupid face on a plane.
That's a highly sophisticated intellectual statement compared to some other things. I mean, I swear to you, there's a girl, I'm not kidding. There's a woman, I think she's Russian. Girl, teenager. She has photos only with bananas. She is peeling banana. She's eating banana. Banana peel is on the floor. By the way, no text. No text. She and banana. I must give her points for creativity. I mean, how many things can you do with a banana without doing what you can do? So, but that's it. And by the way, 20, maybe 20 posts. I mean, not not very active. She has 16.8 million followers.
I'm ready to be beamed off the planet, I think. I can't figure this. Humanity is like, I can't.
16 and each of these banana things has like 270,000 likes and this kind of thing. 16.8 million, you can't say anymore that they're all teenagers. They're not. Statistically, they're not. No. I mean, it can't be. There must be grandmothers of 60 years old there. There must be a few professors of psychology there. There must be, statistically speaking. I mean, it's shocking that anyone who graduated primary school would like a teenage girl with a banana. I mean, but they do. And of course, the jumping cats on YouTube and so on.
That makes more sense to me because it's funny. So I can go, I get a dopamine hit from that. I'm getting something from it. It's funny. This is the most vacuous thing I've ever done on social media. Ended up being one of the most rapidly popular. I mean, within inside of 24 hours, I was like 800 likes for. I was doing nothing. It said nothing. There was nothing there.
So, and the less you say, no, it forces you to deny yourself. Even if you don't feel it. You say, oh, wonderful, I got 1,000 likes. Somewhere at the very, very, very back recesses of your mind, there's a tiny, tiny Richard Grannon voice that says, look what you're doing.
Yeah, this is so stupid.
Stupid. I mean, what's wrong with you? It's a tiny, tiny voice. And of course, not only it forces you to deny parts of yourself, which are sometimes critical, but it forces you to fight with yourself. Because there's this small voice and you tell him, shut up. I got 1,000 likes. Shut the fuck up. Why do you keep tormenting me? I hate you. So it creates what we call dissonance. All behavior on social media is dissonantic, is dissonance-based. All of it. Because even when you post a selfie, it is automatically sharing the selfie with people you don't know, you don't care about, and haters, potential haters. I mean, you're opening yourself up, you're vulnerable. Posting a selfie is the epitome of vulnerability. You can certainly be attacked or reposted or whatever. So it's anxiety enhancing. The minute you post a selfie, your level of anxiety shoots up, absolutely shoots up. Of course, after a million times that you're anxious, after 200,000 times that you have a fight with your inner voice, after 300,000 times that you denied part of yourself, you become depressed.
Yeah.
These are the makings of clinical depression.
Right.
We are clinically depressed when we deny ourselves. We are clinically depressed when you have constant dissonance and feel helpless about it. Dissonance means two forces, two equipotent forces, two forces with the same power that tear you apart, in effect, and so on. So these are the makings of depression. And indeed, teens who were interviewed and were asked the simple question, does it make you feel good to be on social media? A big portion said, I think about 40-something%, said that it makes them feel very bad. Another 20-something% said it makes them feel bad. Only 3%, said that it makes them feel good. Shocking.
That would make you just ask the question, why do?
Why are they there? Conditioning. Precisely what I'm saying. The only reason we do things that make us feel bad is if we can't help it.
Yes.
And the only things we cannot help are addictions and conditioning.
Right.
I maintain that social media is conditioning, not addictive. Of course, every conditioning looks like addiction, because these are compulsive behaviors that you cannot control, and so they look the same, but they're not the same. They're not the same at all. For example, one of the main features of addiction is that it provides you with a meaning. Take the drug addict. A drug addict has to get up in the morning, find money, steal from his mother, find money, and then call the pusher. If you look at it from outside, it's a bit like business.
Yeah.
You have to get up, you have to manage the business.
There's a mission.
And the product, he has a mission, he has a purpose, he has a goal. It's goal-oriented. At the end of the day, he has a product. He consumes the product, it gives him a high. So it provides meaning. We call it exoskeleton. It provides a meaningful exoskeleton. Conditioning, no. Conditioning doesn't provide meaning. Conditioning is totally automated. Like, I want food, I press lever. I don't want pain, I don't press the lever.
Right.
It's like the lever is my meaning and I'm goal-oriented. It's utterly automated, robotic. And most of the behavior on social media is robotic. It doesn't give meaning. It doesn't endow you with meaning. It's utterly robotic in the sense that it's one-on-one. You push results, and again you push. And the result creates the next push. So if I put a selfie and I get 100 likes, I will try to put another selfie so that I get 1,000 likes. And this is conditioning.
Yeah.
It's one of the differences. Addiction is a much more complex phenomenon than conditioning. Social media is simple. There's no complexity there. Actually, there's a hatred of complexity.
Yes.
That's why 140 characters.
Yes.
There's a hatred of complexity.
Yes.
It's anti-complex. And so this is one of the telltale signs. The simpler the activity or the platform, or the more it is geared towards conditioning, than towards addiction.
Okay.
Anyhow, a few perceptions.
Where I was pointing towards is the age issue, and I mean literally the age of the person who's using the social media and when they were born, the age in which they were born. If you were born post 1990, I guess by the time you are coming into your sense of self more socially, which would be adolescent years, wouldn't it, after the age of 12, this is when social media probably will have the most sway over your perception of yourself and the world. Do you think that if you were born into using internet, that you're more susceptible and more vulnerable to the ill effects of it?
I think there are three assuming the internet has an all-pervasive influence, as I've just claimed, I think there should be three groups. One is people who were exposed to the internet in their late 20s, 30s, 40s, etc., and that would include dinosaurs like me. Then people who were exposed to the internet during adolescence, and digital natives who were exposed to the internet during the formative years, which were born with a tablet and were exposed to the internet. I think the first group still uses the first group, I mean the oldies, still use the social media as a form of communication, essentially. Reconnecting with old flames and old pals and so on and so forth, creating social network in the full sense of the word, communicating as they would have done on a telephone or earlier via mail, post office. So they would see social media as a natural extension of the telegraph and the telephone and the post office and so on. And therefore, I think they would miss out on all the pernicious effects of social media, because they would limit their communication to the swapping of information, the expression of very basic emotions, and the coordination of meetings, essentially. And the second group would be, so they would be extremely reluctant to use social media for any truly intimate communication, conversation. They are more face-to-face, more... The second group are people who've been exposed to social media during their adolescence. And they would tend to use social media for social positioning, for competition, for connecting, but for highly specific purposes. So, for example, connecting using it as a romantic aid, or using it in order to exchange information about preferences in music, preferences in movies, and so on and so forth. Again, the communication would be superficial. It would be emotionless in many ways. And so even this group, I would say, is pretty safe, because they have had exposure during the formative years to alternative methods and ways of communicating. Digital natives are doomed. They're doomed because social media pervades all types of communication as early as 6 years old. I have seen 6 years old communicating on social media. I've definitely seen 9 years old and 10 years old and so on. The thing with social media is that the gratification is instantaneous, response times are very fast, therefore any hormonal or other effects in the brain are immediate and addictive. Conditioning is total, and every other mode of communication by comparison looks lacking. It's either too slow or it's too accurate. Ambiguity plays a big role in social media. It's too accurate, or it's too all-encompassing, or it's too intimate, or it's too something. Social media is ideally suited to digital natives, and it both shapes their brains on the one hand, and on the other hand reflects their brains and mentality. They grow up in a world where attention span is very truncated, where the emphasis is on communicating unbridled, sharp emotions, clear, very primitive, very infantile, where all the defense mechanisms are activated in every interaction, where aggression and similar negative emotions are freely expressed and used as means of social control, or peer control, to be more precise. So this is their world. Social media is well suited to it. They have no alternatives. They never experience anything else. Their face-to-face interactions are very limited, if at all. Families have disintegrated, don't forget. We are talking about generations which also, concurrent with the experience of social media, lost all other social experience. People who are 40, 50, 60 years old have experienced the family. People who are 20, 30 years old people who are 40, 50 years old experience the extended family.
Yeah.
So the nuclear family, grandfathers, grandmothers, and uncles, and so on. People who are 20, 30 years old experienced only the nuclear family. And people who are 15 to 25 years old experience no family whatsoever, statistically speaking.
Right.
40% of them grew with single mothers, and about 70 to 80% of them come from divorced families. So the lack of all other social interactions and all other social dimensions makes it impossible for them to compare, to develop critical thinking about what they're experiencing, to realize the limitations and problems of social media, and so on and so forth. Social media is the only social world they know. They have no family, they have nothing else to compare it with, and also because they are not intermeshed, because they are not embedded in other types of social interactions, social units, there's also no control.
Yeah.
There's no control over the usage of social media. This movement of controlling the usage of social media is very new. It's about 2 years old. Only now we're beginning to talk about limiting access to tablets and smartphones, smartphone-free hours, tailoring the use of social media to age groups, etc., etc. But even this control is rudimentary and utterly ineffective. There's no way to control the use of cyberspace. And you can find children as young as 9-year-old or 10-year-old who are self-mutilating online, who are joining suicide cults and death cults, who are exposed to extreme violent pornography, and so on and so forth. The world, therefore, I think there's a problem with the question. There is no world and social media. Social media is the world for digital natives.
Right.
There is no other world outside it. There is no reality outside it.
Okay.
They live inside social media. This is their, and this reminds me of the question you asked me about simulation. These are simulated people. They live inside a simulation. They are in the matrix already.
You said they're simulated people. They themselves are experiencing themselves as simulations.
They don't experience. They experience themselves as real people who are leading real lives, but they don't.
Yeah.
They are living in a matrix.
Yeah.
Social media is their reality. Bits and bytes are the instead of atoms, come instead of atoms. Their families are peers. And these peers are not real. They never see them or rarely see them face to face. They interact with digital renditions of other people, of objects, of places, of events, of.
Yes.
These are all digital, and in this sense, they are denizens of the matrix. Absolutely. They live inside a simulation. So the gulf between someone who is 35 years old and someone who is 15 years old is not a quantitative gulf. The one who is 35 years old uses social media 2.6 hours a day, and the one who is 15 uses social media 6 hours a day, which, by the way, these are the statistics. It's not a quantitative gulf, it's a qualitative gulf. The one who is 35 or 25 comes from reality and uses social media as he would use or she would use any other tool, a knife, a camera. The one who is 15 lives inside social media.
Yes.
To the one who is 15 years old or 10 years old or even 20 years old, up to 24 actually, according to studies by Twench.
Right.
Up to the age of 24, these people live inside social media. They perceive reality to be unreal.
Right.
They perceive social media to be real and reality to be unreal. Because everything they see mediated via a screen. If they see starving children in Yemen, these are bits and bytes and digits on a flickering screen. These starving children in Yemen are as real to them as their peers across the street, as their classmates.
Yeah.
In other words, as unreal to them.
Yes.
The reality has vanished. with this generation. Now, this is an open question. Ancients like me, old people, would say that this is an unmitigated catastrophe because, they can't function in reality. They would elect someone like Donald Trump to the presidency because reality TV and reality are the same. And so they would make decisions which are not grounded in reality or badly grounded in reality, and so they would have bad outcomes and disasters and so. So someone like me would feel that this is horrible. Someone who is a bit younger or a lot younger may say, so what? Reality is becoming simulation. We are becoming the Matrix.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that? Actually, in the interview we had last time, you asked me about simulation. I said, well, if I'm plugged into the Matrix, and I'm allowed to control how the program operates, in other words, to express my wishes and preferences and priorities, and the program abides by them, obeys me. Why should we say it's not real?
Yeah.
For example, if I'm plugged into the Matrix, and my wish is to have a wife with 2 children, and I instruct the program to generate a wife and to generate 2 children, and I live with this wife and 2 children for the rest of my life, another 70 years, and then I die. Could you say that I did not have a wife with 2 children?
I think that you wouldn't be able to say that there's a difference, so there's no way I can tell you that there's a difference.
They're not made of atoms, I agree. So what? The emotional reaction to this wife and 2 children,
Would be 100%,
the experience of having a wife and 2 children would be identical to having a wife and 2 children made of carbon. So this is, I think, what people find very difficult to understand and to accept. There is no difference in principle between simulation and reality. Reality is a simulation made of carbon atoms. That's all. While simulation is a simulation made of other materials or electric currents. So, philosophically speaking, there is no rigorous argument that can distinguish reality from simulation. And if these children live in social media and in cyber world for the rest of their lives and never ever meet another human being made of atoms, I cannot say that their life has been meaningless, insignificant, lacking in any way. I cannot.
I want to ask you a selfish question. I'm single, but I'd rather be in a relationship, and I've been trying for about 6 months to get myself into one. It's very, very hard, and there's a lot of difficulties that I've associated with it, and I want to just pull up 2 things. You said that social media encourages ambiguity. It encourages a lack of intimacy. Could you tell me why that is, and do you think that that would bleed out into the real world? Because these are the things I'm struggling with. People's communication is extremely ambiguous, and there's a terror of intimacy. Just the intimacy of meeting face to face creates this relationship destroying terror. Like, you will be fine until you want to meet in flesh and blood. Now that's a problem, because you've only ever met my false self. So why does social media need to be ambiguous and non-intimate?
The only antonym of ambiguity is intimacy. The only way to disambiguate anything is to get to know it.
Right.
And the only way humans get to know each other is via intimacy.
Okay.
So when we become more and more intimate with another person, that person becomes less and less ambiguous to us.
Right.
Every initial contact is always ambiguous. And every relationship always ends in certainty. It could be very bad certainty.
Sure.
He's not the guy for me, he's not the girl for me, it's not the girl for me. But it's always certainty.
Absolutely, yeah.
The thing is that social media is structured to prevent certainty and to deter intimacy. And the reason it is structured that way is because intimacy Intimacy reduces the need for addiction, reduces the need for conditioning. Intimacy is, in a way, the biggest addiction. When you are in an intimate relationship, it usually consumes most of our emotional resources, cognitive resources, and so on. There's simply no time for other addictions. Or to put it very bluntly, intimacy competes with Facebook.
Yes.
You're either intimate or you're on Facebook. So intimacy, and of course intimacy has social aspects. It's a social activity. It's an interpersonal activity, but it's a social activity. Because you are never only intimate with one person. The minute you're intimate with one person, you're also automatically intimate with her friends, with her family, with her background, with her even city. We never are intimate with one person, we're always intimate with networks centered around one person. In a way, intimacy is a mini social network with extreme addictive power, which of course renders the likes of Twitter, Facebook, and everything else. Twitter and Facebook purvey and rely on loneliness. They need atomized, schizoid, separated, hermits, recluses, nerds, socially inapt, socially unable to bind and to bond and to be intimate. They need this kind of population. It's the only kind of population that becomes conditioned and addicted to social media usage in lieu of real contact and real relationships. We know that manufacturers of products introduce into their products two elements. We know that. First of all, they try to make the products indispensable. Here, we have iPhone 7. Why? iPhone 3 works perfectly. Because they have rendered the product indispensable to our lives via as a status symbol, via branding, via new functions, so-called new functions, and so on. So all manufacturers try to render their products indispensable and built into the products obsolescence. These are the two mantras of manufacturing. Same goes with social media. Social media tries to render itself indispensable and would obliterate any threat to itself. The biggest threat by far is an intimate, mature, adult, healthy, engulfing relationship. So social media are anything but social. They need atomized, lonely individuals. And the second thing is obsolescence. Social media expires much faster than any product. The minute you post a tweet and the minute it's been liked, 24 hours is dead, later it's dead. It's obsolete. And you need to renew the product. You need to post another tweet. You need to tweet again. These are the only manufacturers in the world who made you their employee. It's the only manufacturing industry in the world where the users are its employees. When you buy an iPhone doesn't expect you to go to Foxconn in China and put the components together. But when you use social media, you generate the content. Think about it. It's supposed to be a content platform, yet you generate the content. It's selling the content to advertisers, but you generate the content. It's supposed to be a communication platform, but you communicate. You do everything. Twitter and Facebook are dumb, idiotic, blank spaces, doing nothing but obeying your input. You are working for Facebook and Twitter, and others, of course, that I'm not mentioning.
Are you saying that the wizards of Facebook and Instagram are aware that their users getting into intimate relationships would be bad for business?
Yes, I have no doubt about this. They discourage intimacy in every conceivable way.
You think they're actually discouraging humans from meeting face-to-face with humans because it would make them redundant? And that's written into the algorithms, it's written into...
They're not worried about face-to-face meetings because, as I told you, the platform is built for instant gratification. It's very much like drugs. So that's not a real threat.
Okay.
But the real threat is that you will find someone through Facebook or something that with whom you will develop an intimate relationship. And listen, it's extremely simple. When you start a love affair, you really have no mind for Facebook. I mean, they need your eyeballs.
Yes.
Your eyeballs will now rest on the beautiful woman that you fell in love with.
Yes.
Not on Facebook.
Yes.
She is their competition. They need to eliminate her from your life. They need to monetize your eyeballs. They need your eyeballs. Anything that competes with them for your eyeballs is a bloody threat. And that's your family, your girlfriend, television, other social network, anything. Google. Why Facebook doesn't allow Google to crawl the Facebook database? Did you ever ask yourself? Facebook does not allow Google to crawl the database. Why? I mean, some accounts are private, okay.
Yeah.
You can put a robot text and
Sure.
it will not be scanned. But why the open ones?
Yeah.
Why my page of my, I mean,
Yeah.
Facebook does not allow Google to scan because that would steal away
It's
eyeballs.
content. It's,
of course.
It's resource.
Yes.
The product.
It's what they sell to advertisers and so on. Now, if you have a girlfriend, your consumption of Facebook will collapse by 60%. Perhaps even your girlfriend insists that you don't use Facebook anymore because you are flooded by offers from very beautiful women.
She did, yeah. She
Yes.
insisted on that.
Many do, by the way. Many say, listen,
Yeah, she told me to shut
if we
my
get
account
together, I mean, cut down on social media.
Yeah, yeah.
Because listen, every man, well, almost every man, is flooded with, offers. Sexting is much more common than you think.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
your experience. It's there.
Oh, yeah. So sexting is standard communication now.
Yeah, sexting became standard. So
But
imagine I have a wife or a girlfriend.
Yeah.
Who would go for it? Who would agree to that? I mean, she would tell you, listen, cut it off, cut down. So it's a threat.
so love is a threat to social media.
Love is a threat. Relationship is a threat. Intimacy is a threat. Togetherness is a threat. A community is a threat. Friendship is a threat. Anything that takes you away from Facebook. Period.
So if social media is a virus, is community, family, love, intimacy, is that the antidote to the virus?
Yes, of course. If you once in your life experience true intimacy, social media suddenly feel plastic, feels
Weird.
weird, feels creepy, I would say.
It's
even.
creepy, yeah.
Absolutely creepy.
Yeah.
If you really, for once in your life, experience true intimacy.
Yeah.
And true intimacy is utterly addictive. You will spend the rest of your life looking for it again.
Yes, absolutely.
You will travel to Italy. You will travel to, you will look for it
It's a
everywhere.
good place to start, actually.
Right,
Italian girls
excellent
are
place to
lovely.
start. You will look for it again and again and again. It's poets have been writing poems for the entirety of their life because they've experienced love when they were 21. Real cases. They experienced love when they were 21. And when they were 70, they were still writing poems about love. What is love? How is love? It's love, we know, by the way, physiologically speaking, love is addictive.
Yeah.
Absolutely addictive process.
Yeah.
Why would you not assume that one addiction fights another?
Sure.
For limited, scarce resources. Your eyeballs, your time, your money.
But social media. So love is the almost the antithesis of not the antithesis. It would be the antidote to the virus of social media.
Competitor.
Is the competitor.
Competitor, simple.
So if I'm trying to generate intimacy with people whose brains are conditioned by social media, I am doomed to fail.
Absolutely, yes.
Because they will be ambiguous, counter-dependent, shy of intimacy.
No, they will be conditioned against intimacy.
Oh,
No, it's not a question that they are incapable of intimacy. They regard intimacy negatively, as a threat. They regard intimacy as a threat because one thing that most people neglect to mention is that most interactions on social media are painful. Social media creates fake intimacy. But even that, because it's very minimal, but even that is usually accompanied by some dose of pain. In other words, you put your selfie up. It's a kind of intimacy. I mean, very minimal, tiny, but still it's intimacy. Of 10 comments, 3 will tell you how ugly you are. And I'm being generous.
yeah.
3 will tell you how ugly you are. Never mind if you're not, never mind if you are superstar.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
3 will tell you how ugly you are, just to pain you, to hurt you.
yes,
It's sadistic. It's so People are conditioned to expect and experience pain from even tiny minimal exposure. Now imagine intimacy. You expect intimacy from these people.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
So you're saying they're conditioned to find micro-intimacy very painful, so they assume major...
That macro intimacy is 1,000 times more painful.
Torture.
1,000 times more painful.
There is also, as I was talking...
That's conditioning, by the way, not addiction.
That's conditioning.
It's an example of conditioning.
The other thing I'm thinking is, of course, if I've met them through social media and I've seen them with their filters and the photoshopping and everything else, the last thing they want is for me to meet because intimacy, as you said, was the lack of ambiguity. It's getting to know someone. Then I will see you as you are, not as you have been projecting yourself.
Yes, social media encourage you to present only specific aspects of yourself, or even photoshopped.
Yeah.
Kind of modified. But even those who are totally honest and don't Photoshop their photos, even they are, of course, extremely selective what they present. And they're selective because of the pain.
Yes.
I mean, I would love to be intimate and vulnerable on social media, but then I can expect thousands of...
Oh, you'll be stabbed.
I'll be stabbed to death.
Yes, psychologically speaking.
I'll be stabbed to death. I had an extremely painful childhood and so on, and sometimes I want to share. I'm going through a very difficult period now, but I would never do this on social media. Never. So if ab initio, if from the very beginning some things are excluded, from the very beginning, some things are excluded, then it's not real communication. And it has very little to do with the real person.
Yeah.
These people learn to interact on superficial levels. They can never go deeper because they're terrified, they're pain averse. What social media has done, it has exponentially multiplied the amount of negative social interactions and pain. Exponentially. You know, there are these stories by Thomas Hardy and others about a small village or a small town, and you did something wrong, and then all the town is gossiping about you. That was how many people? How many people gossiped about you? 2,000.
Yeah.
You can be easily attacked on a typical day by 20,000 people. Easily on social media. Easily. Thomas Hardy, in the worst nightmares that he created, like the mayor of Casterbridge, this was the worst. I mean, this guy committed a crime, had to escape, this, that. If you count in the novel how many people criticize him, we are talking, I think, about 60.
Right.
Any post on Facebook would get a bigger number of negative reactions.
Yes, without a doubt.
So social media amplified exponentially the negative aspects of social interactions of all kinds, and especially intimacy. In other words, pain aversion, conditioning.
Yes.
When the dog presses the lever to get food and is electrocuted, he would prefer to die of hunger.
Yes.
Fact.
Yeah.
It's a fact.
Of course.
Dogs die of hunger in experiments because every time they press the lever, they got electric shock. That's what happens in social media. Every time you press the lever, you get an electric shock.
Yeah.
So you don't press the intimacy lever anymore.
Yeah.
And even when it's offered to you in a safe environment, you would still not press it. When the electric shock was disabled, the dogs still did not press the lever.
Yes.
They died, simply.
Yeah.
And that's what is happening to all of us. We're emotionally dying.
What, if I could invite you to be prescriptive, what can I do? In my situation where I am looking to be in a relationship, what would be the path that had the most chance of being successful, do you think? Do I need to go to a country where there is no social media, where there is no internet?
Well, first of all, I think that there are enclaves, even in our society. Social media is much less dominant or prevalent or of interest. For example, academia. You can find gorgeous, intellectual girls who are far more interested in reading and so on than in social media. So depends to a very large extent on the message you're sending. I don't know if you're really talking about yourself, but if you are really talking about yourself, the message that you are sending is that you are social media savvy, that you live on social media, YouTube channel and so on. And therefore you create a filter. Your message creates a filter. And so the women who would approach you are women who are into YouTube, into social media, into celebrities, into gurus, into... perhaps either dispensing with this filter or creating a different filter, a parallel life.
Yeah.
Creating a parallel life.
Okay.
Where you have a totally different filter.
Yeah.
Would then get you the right woman.
Okay.
The right girl.
Okay.
I'm lucky to have this. Because I have a parallel life.
Yeah.
I have a life on the internet, much longer than yours, actually. I have a life on the internet, it's been going on for 25 years. And this attracts this kind of women, and so on, and I utterly ignore them. And but I do have a parallel life. I have written physical books and published them physically. I have been around before the internet. I work in academia, etc., etc. So I absolutely have. So we are forced by social media to develop multiple personality. If we want the old-fashioned way of loving, being intimate, catering to our deep emotional needs, and so on, we are absolutely forced to divorce social media.
Right.
And to do that, you need either to divorce, shut down the devices, or if you can't do that by exigency, then you need to create a parallel life, and you need to simply have two personalities, two parallel trajectories. And then I think it's not too difficult to find, because there are enclaves, seriously big enclaves of women who volunteer, women who work in academia, women who are into theater, there are absolutely enclaves that are not into social media. But of course, as you are now, you attract only such women.
Yes, no, you're right.
Yeah.
I just got love advice from Sam Vaknin, and it was good.
Good luck.
Historical moment.
Good luck. Yeah. If you broadcast this, I'll sue you. Of course.
Sam helped me. No, I didn't. You stop that right now.
I didn't. This is all CIA
slander, propaganda.
I never said these things. I was talking about the revolution in Egypt.